Welcome back to Drama and Popular Opinions. Today I will just be doing a quarterly wrap up for the first 3 months of the year. It is a little bit into April, but I am hilariously busy, so I thought it best to do it now. And let's just get into it. I didn't actually read that much. Like, you'd think so because on Goodreads it says like almost 40 out of 100, but that's because I read the same manga series twice. So I did not read that much in the first 2 months of the year, which is very ironic considering the fact that winter is my favorite season. But for some reason, after New Year's, my reading just like goes down and I read less and less each month. So this isn't even that odd for me. This is just the beginning of my yearly slow down period. So let's get into it. There are some DNFs, but I will mostly go through stuff that I've actually read. Let's just go through our DNFs first. The first thing that I DNF'd, most of these were from the library. That's why I DNF'd them. As I said before, I don't DNF stuff that I've bought. So the first one is If We Were Villains. We've discovered already that I despise dark academia, not as an aesthetic, as a genre, but as a story trope. Like, I hated The Secret History. I knew I would hate this, which is why I got it from the library, but I still wanted to give it a try. If possible, I hated it even more. Like, the writing style and the way that it's presented to you just felt like a fanfic of The Secret History, but they're not the same thing. That's fine. It's fine if they're not the same thing, but it felt like a fanfic of The Secret History. I saw that the woman who wrote this book wrote it when she was like, what, my age, maybe a little bit older than me, after she graduated university. And yeah, you can tell. Nothing against young authors, by the way. I am one. There are people younger than me who are also authors. I was an author when I was younger. But sometimes when someone like writes about their setting or something that they've just experienced, like if she wrote and published this after she finished her master's, you can so tell that it was written while she was in that period, if that makes any sense. And it just reads like The Secret History. Like, the cast of characters, all of them insufferable, all of them meant to be insufferable. Then you just like introduce them all and they're all really pretentious and really annoying and really shallow, and it's like it's just so not my thing. I needed to confirm that, by the way, for some reason. But yeah, for some reason, The Secret History managed to somewhat keep me like hooked somewhat, that I didn't DNF it immediately. But maybe if I'd gotten it from the library, I would have also DNF'd it immediately. You never know. But I did buy The Secret History, so it's not quite the same thing. The next thing I DNF'd was two things that I will go through quickly, and that's, I've been doing this thing where I like get the books that I read in high school and liked and read them again, and it's been going miserably. Frankly, I read Hero of Our Age by Lermontov. It did not grip me at all. At the time when I read it in high school, I remember really liking it. I was so bored. I was bored to tears reading it. I read the summary and I was still bored, which, isn't that big of a compliment. I also DNF'd Life is a Dream by Calderon de la Barca. I was even more bored by this, and especially by the way it was written. At first, I thought it might be the translation, like the Croatian translation. Then I picked up the English translation. I hated both. I hated my time reading both. And I did like this in high school, by the way. I think maybe I was like getting the best of it because I had to read these books at the time. So like when I had to read them, I had to analyze them. I was like, okay, this isn't that bad. But now that I don't have to put myself through this, I really did not have a good time. I brought them both back to the library, I think, like within like what, a week or two of trying to read them. And the last one is The Blue Castle by Ellen Montgomery, which I do own, so I will not like officially properly DNF it, but I put it off because I was not in the mood for it at the time. For some reason, her wordy art style, which is, writing style, is lovely to read, specifically in spring. Like, specifically in spring, maybe summer. I cannot stand her writing style in the winter. I do not know why that is, but it is. I couldn't stand it. So I will pick that back up when I'm in the mood for it again, but I did not want to read it in the winter. Then January, we've got January. I read, obviously, Witch Hat Atelier, which I've spoken about. I've done a whole video about. Now, this will crop up again in February because I read half of it in January and then I read it again entirely when I bought the physical volumes in February. So I read it twice. So basically, those like 13 volumes count for 26 of my books read, which I know people don't count that. I count rereads because I do rereads a lot. So I'm just going to mention that here. But yeah, if you want to hear me gush and rant about that, watch that video because I'm actually very happy with that video. It might be my favorite that I've ever filmed. Ironically, because I really put in some effort to like include infographics in the video and whatnot. So I really like that video, but that's what I read in January, and then I read it again in February. Now, in January, I also read, which I also have a vlog about, and that is Emily Wilde 2, which I despise. I think I gave it 1 star. I expected it to be like a 2 or a 3 because I didn't like book 1, so I already expected it to kind of be bad, but I did not expect it to be 1. Like, I despised this book. So you can see that video also for that review. I'm not going to like drone on about it. I also read Lightfall Volume 3, which is a graphic novel series that I quite like, actually. Like, I love the art style. Like, I'm not like a huge fan of the story, you know, like it isn't something sensational, but it's fun. And I always like the villain thing where like the villain is actually in the right. I love the art style. I really do like the representation of certain magical aspects in this being like personified things like anxious thoughts and fear and whatnot. I quite like it. I like where it is going, basically. This was quite enjoyable. I have to collect volume 1, but I would highly recommend it because I think of all the graphic novels that I read like last year, this is the only one that actually took the effort to collect. Then I read, which I also feel like I mentioned, so I'm just going to gloss over it, but I'm just running through everything I read. I also read Animal Farm, which I like Orwell, obviously, because his ideas are grounded in a lot of the stuff that he's seen during his work as like a spy or agent or whatever he was. However, I find his novels in particular unbearable, like genuinely nauseating. I like his essays. I like his nonfiction. I cannot stand his fiction. I'm sorry. Like, the message is a clear one, and that's great, but it's a bit much for me. Like, I also couldn't stand 1984. Like, it was far too long for the point it was trying to make. A lot of people love it. A lot of people don't find it sickening. That's good for you. I'm sorry. I can't stand it. I agree with everything he's saying. I just cannot stand how he's saying it. Then I also read Language of Ghosts, Love of My Life, Heather Fawcett. This was the next one that I read in the series. I'm currently reading, I think, Islands of Elsewhere, but Language of Ghosts, love it. It, like, she twists tropes in every single book she does, except Emily Wilde. But here she twists the whole like Dark One thing, because the Dark One is actually the main character, or rather the siblings of the Dark One are the main character. And I loved it. I loved that twist. I love the play with the trope where it's like, how do you handle being that hated and that feared? It has a lovely magic system. Somehow, even though all her books are standalones, she manages not to repeat herself too much, which is so strange to me, because like, for someone who doesn't do series, to have so many unique ideas, that's great. I love it. I adore her. Like, reading this after Emily Wilde, I was like, okay, yeah, this is why I read you, Heather. This is why I love you. I love the book. This is the only thing I don't like, maybe, is the setting, because this is one of her rare books where it isn't set during the cold months. This is like set in the summer on an island at sea. So I didn't like the setting. But the whole thing was just very fun, very enjoyable. The magic system was super cool, actually, I will say. And the main character is always unique in some way, but not in an OP way. Like, her main characters are always very, very interesting. I think I like all of her main characters except Emily. And then lastly but not least, I finished The Other Wind, and like the short stories that come after it, The Daughter of Odin and Firelight. My Earthsea reread has been so chaotic because sort of like my Witcher reread. I feel like it took me like 3 years to fully reread the series because I just pick up the books when I feel like it. But I think because I read The Other Wind so much later after the rest of the novels, I didn't want to reread it when I reread the rest of the novels. So I finished technically that very long reread, but I am actually like as I'm speaking waiting for the graphic novel of the first Earthsea book to arrive, so kind of ties the entire thing together because I will probably reread the first book when the graphic novel gets there. So obviously I love this book. I love the short stories, but it is not my favorite book and it never was my favorite book. I think it's my third favorite behind Farthest Shore and Wizard of Earthsea if you ever cared about the rankings. So love it, but I still have my gripes. Now we reach February, in which I did not read much. I think March is going to be even worse, but let's just get through February. Now, it took me 2 weeks to read The Crow Girl, which I love, by the way. We watched the show, like me and my mother, because we watched every crime show that the UK puts out. And then I immediately picked up the book, a brick of a book, by the way. It's a shame that I don't have the physical copy with me right now, but it's like 800 pages. I read the ebook, which was 1,000 pages. Like it was 1,000 page ebook. Took me 2 weeks to read it, not because I wasn't interested or it wasn't gripping me, but because I needed I needed to stretch it out. At first, it was like what 100 pages a night. Then later, it was a bit more as the story got going because it's just again, we repeat this trend. It's sickening, nauseating. Okay, it's just the subject matter is sickening, even if it is good and well handled. Like, I was like genuinely putting down my tablet after a night of reading, being like, okay, that was excellent, that was good, that was very well done, but I cannot spend hours reading about pedophiles tonight. I cannot. I'm sorry. So, yes, this book, again, it's a thriller, but it is primarily about a pedophile ring. So if that's not something that interests you at all in any universe, like thriller, crime, or otherwise, do stay away from it. But the entire book is about that. So very well done, very compassionate, very not violent, actually, like not violent, but graphic. There are so many like graphic things in any type of media these days that I was very frightened how they were going to do it, but it's done in a very compassionate, palatable, non-graphic way. So, but still plenty of nauseating stuff without needing to hear about it in detail. It's still sickening because it just is. So, loved the book. Gave it 5 stars. It was excellent, and I cannot wait to see what the UK does with the series because it's different. Like it is mostly the same, but it is different from the book. So I am interested to see how it keeps going. And the father definitely has way more depth in the book, even if it is decidedly negative. The other things that I reread, Demon in the Wood, I just read that sometimes because I really love the Grishaverse. But when I don't feel like rereading the books, I just reread the graphic novel. I love it so much and it's very good. I also reread Winter of the Witch, which I do have a whole video about. It's very long. And I bumped down my rating, which happened for the first time upon a reread because for a long time I just haven't touched the ratings on the books that I've loved for years, but it forced me to drop my rating. Like I had to. I just do not feel the same about this book anymore, and I do not think it is like near the quality level of the first two books. So, even though I still love the ending and a lot of the stuff in the book, I had to bring down the rating. What else did I read? Right. Snow Country. I don't know the author right now. You're gonna see it on the screen. Snow Country. I like the little cloth-bound classics. They're really pretty, and I want to collect them. But I also really wanted to read about snow. And while I did get some of that, I super did not enjoy this book. That doesn't mean that I hated it. It was a 3-star, but as you know, as you perhaps know, a 3 star is the worst rating that I could give a book because that means that I just did not care one way or the other for anything that was going on at all. Like, I didn't even care to give it a negative rating because that would mean that I personally hated something, but it was such a meh blob of a book. And it was apparently like the first Japanese work of fiction or novel to get a Nobel Prize, which I hope there were better contenders because this was just such a non-entity of a book. I don't even have the thoughts. I don't even have the thoughts. I barely had the thoughts when I actually finished it, like what, a month and a half ago. And then I read like my first tea kingfisher, which was Bryony and Roses. I didn't know where to start, so I like went on Reddit, and this was apparently a really good one, most of all like recommended by everyone because I don't like short stories and I didn't really want it to be romance heavy, and I like fairy tales, so like this was a very good one. I actually quite enjoyed it. Like, I gave it 4 stars. Everyone said that her humor isn't really like universal. Like, it isn't for everyone, and I can see why, because sometimes she's funny and then sometimes I'm like, okay, you're trying really hard. But it was fun. It was fun. I did not hate my time reading it. Every time that I sat down, opened the ebook and started reading, I didn't like start yawning or roll my eyes like now. But I quite enjoyed it. It was very much fun. And the characters, I was surprised by how much I didn't mind them. It felt a little bit too modern, maybe, considering that it's supposed to be like definitely set in the past or the fictional past. It felt a little bit too modern with its references and comments and some slang, but it was fun. It was also, maybe this is again just a me thing because I don't like it. The smut readers out there, I think, would laugh, but it was a little bit too sexualized for me. Like, there is no actual smut, but I feel like the main character in particular is very easily turned on, let's put it that way. Like, I feel like the randomest thing would be happening or something that's like very chill, and then she would mention that she is, I don't know, that she enjoys the touch or that it inflamed her or whatever. I'm not putting it into proper context because I don't remember anymore. I do not have the receipts, but it felt to me genuinely like several times I was like, how are you horny right now? Like, this isn't, it doesn't feel like that type of story for her to be constantly thinking or feeling about that. So, while there isn't any actual smut, which I'm grateful for, I was like, can you please think about anything else for like 5 minutes? But again, people don't mind that. I do, though. I do. March, I read even less books. It took me so long to read this one book. I think since like the middle of February. We will get to it. First, I read Small Things Like These by Claire Keegan because I watched the film and I loved the film. Like, I loved the film. And the book was just fine. I don't know if I would have liked the book if I didn't like the film, if that makes any sense. Like, the book was fine. There wasn't anything wrong with it, but I think we've just discovered that I really, really don't like short form content. No, not content, media. Because it was too dialed down, I suppose, for what I felt from the movie. Like, the movie was like, what, an hour and a half, and I feel like it got so much more across and it actually made me like tear up and feel something, whereas the book just felt like an overly long like report about the film. Like, about the story that the film put into emotion. The book just felt like a short article, an article about the topic. I didn't feel any connection or emotion from the book that I got from the film, I suppose. I also never would have read this, though, if not for the film, because I do not care for literary fiction, but I like the film so much that I really wanted to see like what the source material was. Now, next book, which is probably my favorite book that I've read this year, apart from like Witch Hat, and that is Lolly Willows by Sylvia Townsend Warner. I will just say one thing about it, and that is that you need to push through. Like, so many people I've seen on Goodreads have DNF'd it within the first like 100 pages, or like within the first half of the book. Trust me, I would have DNF'd it too if that was all there was, but pushed through to the ending. And then if you still don't like it, it is simply not something that resonates with you. But for me, it's on the level of like Nausicaa, where I do not really want to articulate what it means to me because I feel like we'd be here for 15 days and I don't really even want to articulate it, but it did. It did resonate with me, with what I think, with what I believe and value, and it hit. It really, really hit, and it's one of those things where if it doesn't hit for you, we are not, we can't, we cannot get along, I suppose, because we fundamentally don't understand something about each other. I hope that makes sense and isn't too mean, because I think everyone has something that's like fundamental to what they believe and value and who they are as a person, and where if someone doesn't understand it or doesn't like it, it is immediately like a point of contention between them. So I do hope you understand what I think. Now let's talk about the elephant in the room. Then I will get to my current reads. And the elephant in the room is The Crystal Cave by Mary Stewart. This book made me angry. I was thrilled when I found out that there was like a Merlin quartet, like with before the life of Arthur, with Merlin, with his father, with the birth and upbringing of Arthur, his kingship, and his death. Like, I was thrilled. It's a beautiful floppy edition, wonderfully printed. It's beautiful. Imagine my surprise when Mary Stewart, a woman apparently famous for writing good female characters in romances and mysteries, I think the other things that she writes. Imagine my surprise when she somehow, apparently an Arthurian fan, managed to make a book about the objectively most interesting character in that myth, legend, story, and make him dull and make the entire story misogynistic. Like, I could not believe when that happened, because there were a few instances in the middle where I was like, okay, this is great. This is picking up. Like, we had great sections, especially like when Merlin is with his father Ambrosius and when they talk and bond and everything. Imagine my shock when she was weirdly misogynistic about all the female characters in the novel, and apparently it doesn't get better. I checked about like the later books, and but that is like, that aside, she also made it boring. The story about Merlin and Arthur cannot be boring unless you really, really try hard. Like, there's very few things that I would find boring about a story containing Merlin and Arthur and Camelot, but she somehow found them. She turned it all into historical stuff, into like which king is going where and who's conquering what. Merlin does no magic, by the way. Spoiler, like, he does no magic. He's just a prophet, and it isn't even magic. It's a god thing. It's very religious, like Christianity oriented, where he, like, God gives him visions. He doesn't even believe that they are his visions. He does no magic. He learns no magic. The book is called The Crystal Cave, where he apparently learns stuff from his teacher Galapas. He learns fuck all. We don't even see it. Like, I think there's maybe one chapter where he is actually with his teacher in the Crystal Cave. We're told that he learned stuff. Never shown. Doesn't matter. He's dead the next time Merlin comes back to the continent. The Crystal Cave, used once. And the visions are part of a Christian god thing. So, not even magic. All of Merlin's most interesting characteristics gone, stripped away. He's just boring. He's just really boring. Apart from his conversations with his father, everything else was so deeply uninteresting and dull. Maybe his interactions with, like, his servant at times can be interesting, and maybe his like conversations with Uther, but everything felt like she was trying to make it into plot devices. Like she wanted to make everything about fate and destiny, which I love, by the way, about that legend. That is why I love the show Merlin so much. Fate and destiny and inevitability and all of that woven in together with personal choices. Like she took that concept and ran with it, but ended up making everyone just vessels of destiny and not characters that you give a crap about. I do not care about Merlin by the end of the book, and I spend like 500 pages with him, almost. Uther and Igraine, who actually had quite a bit of personality in the second half of the book. Like, Igraine was the one woman where I felt like a speck of personality and respect for her from the author. Is just literally just a vessel. He said, like, doesn't matter what happens to her, she just needs to birth Arthur. And I heard that it just gets worse. Like, Arthur, non-entity, even though all the books are literally about him. Merlin, even more of a non-entity. Like, women, horrendous, if not even worse, later on. And that was just such a massive disappointment. I had such high hopes for this book, and the way that I was prepared to suffer through a lot just to have like 2,000 pages to read about Merlin and Arthur and Camelot and the knights, and she manages to make it boring. She manages to make it boring. Like, I think I also gave that like, what, 3 stars, 2.5 stars? Because the greatest sin in fiction is that you are so dull, you cannot even get me to care about you doing something bad. Like, I could not even get that upset about her treatment of women because I was so bored. I was so bored. I just wanted it to end. I started skimming a lot. That's when you know it's bad. Also, yes, women, for some reason, sometimes being very misogynistic about their female characters is a very weird phenomenon. Because if she was known for being this type of person, that's one thing. But apparently, from all the reviews that I read of people who read her other books, they said that they're not really sure why she was like that in this series, why she couldn't handle, like, the women of Arthurian legend as well as she does her other characters. So I really don't know what happened to you, Mary Stewart, but as a self-proclaimed Arthurian fan in your epilogue, I have no idea how you managed to turn something that literally is very, very difficult to get wrong into such sludge. Congratulations. She's dead, I think, but congratulations. I do not know how she managed it, and no one was more upset about this than me. Genuinely. Like, those few highlights, I was like, yes, this is going to be excellent. We finally made it out of the slog. Not good. Absolutely not good. And I cannot even be angry about it anymore because I just can't believe she managed to make this story of Arthur and Merlin boring. The last thing I want to talk about is this beautiful, very like old copy. Like, I will try and show you. Like, it's falling apart. It's old. It's yellow. Like, it smells so sweet. This is a copy from 1917. So old, falling apart, of A Connecticut Yankee in King Arthur's Court by Mark Twain, which, for reference, it still has like the old library logging system where it has like the card, which I still cannot believe. This was donated to my like town library, I think, in 2009. I'm the only person who's gotten it out of the library ever, literally ever, since it was brought into the library, and probably left by someone who like had it in their basement, not knowing that this is literally like a book from 1917 you cannot even get in Europe. One copy exists in my like entire city, and I'm the only person who ever checked it out, but I'm currently reading it. I think I have like 100 pages left of the book. Great fun. I love Mark Twain. The only problem is that I don't like getting books like this from the library because it takes me a long time to read it. Like, it just isn't a bingeable book. It's like small vignettes in the daily life of the Yankee. And it's great fun, and it's excellent, and it's wonderful, and I love Mark Twain. It's just not a bingeable book. Like, I cannot read this as quickly as I would like to. Like, I think I already have to take it back to the library by Monday, and I don't feel like reading those last 100 pages. Like, if this was my copy, I'd be reading this for like months, probably. But since it's from the library, I'm going to read it, finish it, and take it back. I was also mildly mildly tempted to steal it because like obviously no one wants it, no one's reading it. Like it was literally in their like what is it called, depository, where they had to like go and bring it to me because it's not even like in the regular library. No one cares about this book, no one reads this book, no one checks it out where I live, and it's a beautiful, beautiful old weathered copy. I was so tempted to steal it, but I am not someone who steals from the library, which is arguably the best institution that any place can have. I cannot steal from the library. I would just not be able to handle that. So worry not. It is going to be taken back to the library no matter how much I want the copy and no matter how much no one else where I live cares about it. So that's just something I wanted to say and document before like I take it back because it's beautiful and it's so, so torn up. I love it. I love it to bits. It brings us to the end of the video. I hope it was kind of fun because I knew I was going to rant about the stuff I read in March because it's very recent and I really wanted to talk about it because I feel like everything else either had a dedicated video or I mentioned it before, but I like doing like quarterly check-ins because I feel like stuff accumulates if I do it like every half year or whatever, and I do like having like mini thoughts to look back on when I'm doing my favorite books of the year. But so far in the first like quarter, we've found like 2 favorite things of the year. Like we have Witch Hat and we have Lolly Willows. So that's excellent. That's great. Maybe even Yankee. We'll see. We'll see. But yeah, it was a decent enough reading quarter for how much I usually read at this time of year. And the next quarter is not the worst one of the year because I think July and August is my worst time of the year. But since I'm going to be heinously busy this April and May and June are the beginning of the hellscape months for me, I really wonder how much I'm going to read. But it's also my birthday, so I'm going to get a lot of books soon. Either way, it was fairly okay. How has the beginning of 2025 gone for you? Have you found new favorites or has it just been dead after dead? I really want to know. So I will see you in the next video.